All right, we are on the very last lesson of our 10.1 unit, which is going to go over absolutism in Europe, specifically focusing on Louis XIV. So these first three words are all very similar to each other. So absolutism, so when we see this ISM, we know that it's a practice, okay? So the practice of unlimited centralized authority, the practice of being an absolute monarch, the practice of being an autocrat. So for an absolute monarch, remember a monarch is a king or queen. So an absolute monarch is a king or queen who holds supreme total authority. So an absolute monarch would practice absolutism with this idea that they're going to be in charge. They make the total authority. They make the complete idea. An autocrat is a ruler, not necessarily a king or a queen. So an autocrat could be a dictator, an autocrat could be a president, but they're a ruler with absolute power. So again, all three of these words are very similar. Okay, this word is extremely important, and we're going to spend a lot of this year learning this word, memorizing this word, understanding this word. Westernization. All right, so just like the ism shows a practice, the ization, all right, shows a process. Okay, so Westernization, the key part of this is West. When we see the West, we want to think Europe, just like we talked about with the Ottomans. So the process whereby societies come under or adopt Western or European culture. So when we're thinking about societies that doing this, we're pretty much thinking of Asia or Africa that are coming under and they're adopting this Western or European culture. So we are replacing a traditional culture with a European or a Western culture. And then consolidate, we've talked about this word for a few times now, it's to bring together, to get more of something. And typically an absolute monarch, an absolute autocrat, anybody along those lines, they're going to consolidate power to one person. All right, so we're going to talk, we talked about that, how do they maintain, gain, and consolidate their power. So this is just going back over that word. All right, so this just kind of breaks down what it is. So absolute, complete, or total. Remember, this mono means one, and archy is a form of government. So that brings us into these two words. So the absolute monarchy is the form of government, where the absolute monarch is the person. All right, now if we take a look at this, we see some characteristics. So here we have the ruler, and we can see that they're in a crown. Okay, so this is going to be our king or queen. This is our absolute monarch or our autocrat. And these are some things that they're going to do. They use the armies to expand or consolidate borders under the ruler's control. So they spread control. Controls religious authorities. The reason that you control religious authority is so that you have God giving the ruler power. So by controlling the religious authority, you're basically telling people, hey, God put me in charge. You need to listen to me. Circumvents, ignores, or uses assemblies to approve or rubber stamp the ruler's initiatives. So this gives the appearance of people having say, but they don't. This basically is how a lot of absolute monarchs are going to work up until we get to the French Revolution, because we're going to see that that's a total letdown, because the French Revolution is going to kind of get rid of that idea. They make laws, they dispense the justice. Oh my God, dispenses justice is not that difficult. So in here, they're going to not only make the laws, but they're going to punish. And obviously, they're going to punish people that they don't agree with. They're going to allow their friends to continue to do what they want. And then limits or controls the powers of the nobles. If you remember, this is very similar to the Tokugawa shogunate, who controlled the daimyo. Okay. All right, so at this point, you should have your pop-ups. You can cut them out, put them in as you're seeing each of the people. These are 4 of our big absolute monarchs. It does not obviously show all of them, but it is going to show a good number. And our important one is going to be this guy right here, who's going to be Louis. So a couple things lead to this idea of rulers with total power. The church, when we think about this, we're talking about the Catholic Church. loses power after the Reformation. There starts to become a lot of money from the colonies. This is our Americas. They got a lot of money, and now they have large armies. So our first big one is Philip II of Spain. So Philip II of Spain is going to get a lot of wealth from the New World colonies. This is mostly in South America. Okay, and he uses the Catholic Inquisition to maintain power. His big thing, and this is something that you really want to make sure you understand, is the idea of divine right. His power comes directly from God. And that means if you question Philip, you question God. And that's not going to be something that he is going to allow. So when we're looking at this, we're realizing that Philip here is going to use this divine right as a way of justifying his power, because he's going to sit there and say, hey, God gave me the right, so therefore I'm going to do whatever I want. And if you say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, I'm going to say, well, then you're saying God is wrong. Henry VIII. So this VII, this is an 8. Remember, V is 5. And each one of these things equals 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. He is the Tudor King of England. He is going to break with the Catholic Church in order to gain a divorce. So you might have talked with him about a little bit prior during last year. He has 6 marriages. He is looking for a son. He ends up with his most famous child being Elizabeth. And this is Elizabeth I, who develops more of the Anglican Church and is able to actually really be the child that Henry wanted. This is our main man, Louis. So what we have here with the XIV, this is 10, this means 4, so this is Louis the 14th. He is the King of France. And he is called the Sun King, and he's called the Sun King because as the earth revolves around the sun, right, France revolves around him. All right. He is famous for saying "Laissez moi," I am the state, and his big piece is the Palace of Versailles. And what he does with the Palace of Versailles is he spends taxes on a gold palace for himself. All right, and he sends that all on him. He's also going to be very similar to the Tokugawa shogunate, where he's going to force a lot of the nobility and the nobles to go live with him so that they can be watched over by Louis. So this is just going to be a couple pictures that show you the size of the Palace of Versailles. These are all actual photographs from the palace. There were 2,300 rooms. It was 550,000 square feet, 6,000 paintings, 2,000 sculptures, and this was just one little like garden area. This was the Hall of Mirrors. At the time in the 1700s, having mirrored glass was extremely expensive, but also just to give you an idea, this would be something, this line, here's our floor, this is an average size person. So when we're thinking of the grandeur of it and that all of that we see that is yellow is actual gold. Here we have the king's bedroom. Okay, very well done. And then now we've got the queen's bedroom. It was not uncommon for the king and queen to sleep in separate bedrooms, mostly because they were marriages of alliances. These were not marriages of love. These were marriages where the king and queen were married from different countries so that those countries had an alliance. If you notice in the queen's bedroom, this is a lot of gold. This is a lot of like fluff, so that people could kind of realize, oh, how wealthy they were. At the same time this is happening, though, you're getting a lot of people in France that are starving. Here you have the royal chapel, and what you can notice on the floor is that is all polished marble. So even though it looks like glass or it looks like it might be water, it's actually polished marble. And here are the gardens of Versailles. This is just one little section of the gardens. The gardens themselves would stretch for a lot farther, and this is just outside of Paris. So we have our last absolute monarch. Sorry, guys. Our last absolute monarch, which is Peter the Great, the Tsar of Russia. So when we think of Tsar, we're thinking of a king. It comes from that idea of Caesar, and he is going to westernize Russia. So he has a simpler alphabet, the first newspapers, and he will have a brand new capital, which he will call St. Petersburg. He's going to name this after himself. All right, your responsibility at now is to go to page 34. Hopefully that's still right. And you are going to watch the video that I will have linked below this video that you will be watching about Louis, and you are to go through and complete all of these things. So your responsibility is to go through, do the readings, do these questions before finally completing the last assignment. Great job, guys.